Imagine your family home going up in flames, half of the children go missing. One would think that these children tragically suffered and died in the fire, but others wonder if this is not the truth. Many question, are these children alive and this was a cover-up? Were these children kidnapped? Let's talk about it. Before I continue in the story, I would like to ask that if you enjoy this content or any other videos of mine that you have watched before, please like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. I will also include in the comments below, I will pin the comments, stories and cases that I would like to cover, and I would like you to comment which one you are most interested in hearing. Okay, so let's talk about this bizarre case, and I want to know at the end of this, do you think this is crime related, or is this truly just a house fire? Picture Christmas Eve. You're surrounded by your family. You're sitting by the fireplace, listening to Christmas songs, sharing in lovely family time. It is full of joy and laughter. You're excited for what the holiday will bring. The holiday season tends to bring about a festive buzz to it that is almost intoxicating. At least it is for me. I am a true Christmas fan and love the holiday season from start to finish. And it sounds as though this family was enjoying with everything that Christmas Eve has to offer. However, that beautiful, dreamy experience would quickly change. What started as a routine call to the fire department to put out a house fire rapidly shifted to a case of kidnapping, perhaps attempted murder, and possibly premeditated arson. Although many people were quick to dismiss this case as nothing more than an accident, a tragic accident at that, there really are so many coincidences that occurred that allude to the fact of 5 of the Sodder children didn't perish in the fire, but vanished. So let's talk about the Sodder family. This begins with their parents, George, the patriarch, and Jenny, the matriarch. Both George and Jenny had immigrated from Italy when they were children, but each of them had very different upbringings. George's brother, the only relative who immigrated with him to Ellis Island, unfortunately deserted him shortly after and returned to Italy. So George was all alone. And this did not happen as an adult. He was abandoned at just 13. George eventually found work on the railroads, and then as a truck driver. George was an intelligent young man and very driven to be successful and make a good life for himself. And he worked as husband and wife into this prominent Italian immigrant community called Fayetteville, where they expanded their family with 10 children. Fun fact, I have deep Italian roots in my family, and my grandparents lived in West Virginia for an extensive period of their life. I live on the west coast of the United States now, but most of my family is on the east coast or in the south, and I was born in the south myself. Most residents of this Italian immigrant community would have told you that the Sodders were a very well-liked family. They had a decent-sized home in the Appalachian town and really pretty much got along with everybody. George was described as being outspoken now and again, being outspoken from time to time, especially about Mussolini, who was an Italian politician and journalist who founded and led the National Fascist Party in Italy. He had strong opinions about Mussolini, but the family overall was depicted as friendly. They, engaged with their neighbors and were active in the community gatherings. Nevertheless, a local magistrate would later tell the media that the Sodders were one of the most respected middle-class families around. Now, despite their amicable nature and overall pleasant status in their hometown, a series of events would leave them questioning if someone had it out for their family. Let's go back to Christmas Eve of 1945. 9 of the 10 Sodder children were home that night, with their eldest son being away in the military. As mentioned previously, they spent time together as a family, enjoying and fully soaking up the holiday season. The kids even got to open a few presents early, which sounds so fun and joyful. And as the night went on and as it got later, Jenny and George decided, it's time for everybody to head to bed. Filled with so much excitement, 5 of the children pleaded with their parents to stay up later. 5 children were Maurice, who was 14, Martha, who was 12, Louis, who was 10, little Jenny, who was 8, and Betty was 6. And after a stern warning that it was time to turn the lights out and go to bed, Jenny, George, and these kiddos turned in for the night. But just after midnight, Jenny awoke, and it was not by her children, but by the shrill ring of the telephone in their hallway. Their bedroom was on the first floor, which she shared with her husband and their youngest child, who was just a baby. Jenny would make her way out of the bedroom, and when she did so, she was met with the harsh glare of the kitchen and living room lights. At this moment, she's feeling irritated because she thinks that her children left didn't really dwell on this and didn't think too much of it. Jenny is planning on going to bed, but moves in the house to turn off the lights that she thinks her children have left on, but comes to discover that the drapes were open and the front door was unlocked. Now, at this point, she is none the wiser. She still thinks that this is all her children's doing, that they must have been so excited about going to sleep, getting ready for Christmas, that they were forgetful and didn't turn the lights off, didn't close the drapes, and did not lock the door. So Jenny takes care of all of these things and then returns to bed about an hour later at 1:30 in the morning. Jenny wakes up again, and this time it is by a strange noise. The sound of something landing on the roof with a thud. No, it's not Santa Claus, y'all. It is not. It sounded like the object was going to roll off the house. And although she was startled by this noise, she passes it off as a branch from a tree falling on the roof, and she drifts to sleep once more. I don't know about you, but I'll tell you what. If I got that phone call and heard that weird kind of sinister laugh, had all my lights on in that house, and found my front door unlocked with all of the drapes open, and then I hear a weird noise on my roof, you bet I am not going back to bed. I'd be waking up my husband, sir, go do some investigating. I would be calling the police. The last thing I would be doing is going back to sleep. Granted, I understand this was a long time ago. They lived in a safe community, and so she probably really did not suspect anything, but so again, I'm not judging what she did or didn't do. I'm just saying, as a natural skeptic, I suppose, and as someone that always thinks the worst case scenario, I would not fall back asleep. Now, fast forward a little bit more. The third time Jenny would wake up, she would be confronted with the most alarming occurrence of all. Billows of smoke rolling into the bedroom. After shaking her husband George from his slumber, the couple made their way into the hallway. Smoke was everywhere. It blanketed the house while flames engulfed the stairs and crept up toward the children's bedrooms. As you can imagine, that has to be a terrifying exposure or situation. That has to be absolutely terrifying for parents to know that this imminent, fast-moving danger is heading towards your children. George and Jenny shouted and yelled in an attempt to wake up their kids and desperately pleaded for everybody to get out of the house. The family would assemble on the front lawn to meet up in safety to kind of check in, but half of them were missing. The 5 children who had stayed up late were nowhere to be seen. At this point, the flames were so fierce and far too unsafe for George to enter the home through the front door. He typically kept a ladder alongside his hopes were crushed when he rounded the corner of his house to find that the ladder that was always there was gone. So then his next plan of attack was to drive one of the trucks next to the house, thinking that the roof of the vehicle just might be high enough to boost him into the window. However, this would also fail because when George turned the key in the ignition, he was met with silence. Both vehicles were somehow dead. Meanwhile, one of the older children, named Marion, had gone to a neighbor's home to call the fire department. The firehouse was literally only 2 miles away, but nobody arrived. So at this point, the parents are not able to get into the house to save their kids. The fire department does not show up. They have no working vehicles to go seek help themselves. No access to a phone themselves other than the neighbors. So all they can do as a family is stand and watch their home burn to the ground with presumably 5 of their children still inside. While this was happening, a neighbor did go out to look for the town's fire chief, F.J. Morris, and at 8 o'clock on Christmas morning, hours after the fire had just completely demolished this home, the fire department arrived. And the reason for their late response: allegedly the fire chief could not drive the fire truck and said it was a holiday. So apparently the firefighting team was off duty. Now, as is pretty customary, local police arrived shortly after this to start on their preliminary investigation, and the coroner was not far behind. Police chalked the fire up to faulty wiring, yet there had never been any electrical problems in the house. The coroner assured George and Jenny that the 5 children most certainly perished, but he nor the police found any evidence of human remains along the charred pieces of the Sodders' home. And so, because of this, and because of the weird things leading up to the fire, the parents were not convinced that they were dead. So let's have a little recap. Jenny shares with police that when she woke up and noticed the fire and smoke, that she was able to turn on the downstairs lights, which to her signaled that the electricity was in fine working order. Jenny and George didn't ever smell burning flesh during the fire. They didn't hear screams. Neither did the neighbors. But not only that, where there should have been 5 human skeletons, there were none. Later, the Sodder family would conduct their own investigation because they didn't feel like the police, the coroner, or the fire department thought any more of this than just a fire. And during their personal investigation, Jenny would discover from a nearby crematorium that the temperatures and time required to fully disintegrate a skeleton were far hotter and longer than any house fire could produce. So, again, we have some very weird occurrences that took place, but now we have scientific, factual evidence that tells us this was not the condition for skeletal remains to be disintegrated. It did not make sense that there were no bones among the ashes. So, because the family is unsatisfied with the authorities' quick conclusions and brief explanations as to what happened, the Sodders raised questions to the fire department, the police, their neighbors, and the community overall. Evidence suggesting that everything was not as it seemed began pouring in. A local bus driver who had been traveling through the area that night came forward as a witness and reported seeing what he described as fireballs being hurled at the Sodders' home, which could have been a possible explanation for the loud rolling noise Jenny had heard. Another woman from the community told authorities that she believed she saw a car pass by with the 5 missing Sodder children when all the other neighbors were rushing outside to see the blaze. And even people outside of Fayetteville had something to offer the Sodders. A waitress at a diner 50 miles away who said on Christmas morning she served 5 children breakfast, but she couldn't describe the adults who accompanied them, but remembers that there were 5 children, and she remembered seeing them drive away in a car that had a Florida license plate. Reports like this one became more prevalent as the media circulated pictures of the missing children. The family would even go on to 4 kids with the 4 adults, all stayed in one room together, checked in at midnight, and then left early the next morning. Because there had been different sightings of the Sodder children, it prompted the family to pick apart the events leading up to the fire. Now, George begins recollecting on the months leading up to the fire. He remembered that in the fall, a man had shown up looking for work with his truck company. In the midst of their conversation, the man had rounded the house and remarked at the Sodders' dual fuse boxes, and he said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George assured this man that he had just had them checked by their local power company, which he actually had done, and that everything was fine, that this was not a fire hazard. But not long after this, a different man shows up, trying to sell George life insurance. George ends up refusing the life insurance, and in doing so, this man became alarmingly upset, and he shouted, quote, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." End quote. Now, as you can imagine, that's an alarming thing to hear. That's an interaction that absolutely rattled George and frightened him. But at the same time, he didn't give it much thought more than that, because at that time in Italy, things were in upheaval with the war, and he knew that he had never been shy about his political opinions. So, yes, he was bothered by what this man said, but also felt like there was no merit to it. George and Jenny weren't the only family members with odd occurrences to report. Their older children claimed that prior to Christmas, they saw an unknown vehicle parked along US Highway 21. They felt that the driver of this car seemed to be watching the younger kids on their way home from school. As part of their own investigation, George and Jenny called out a telephone repairman to come to their house. The wires were hanging limply from the pole and no longer connected to what used to be the Sodder home. And upon inspection of the wires, the man reported that the wires appeared to have been cut, not scorched by the flames. Another witness approached the family and said the night of the fire, he saw a man leaving the scene. In his arms, he had a device commonly used for removing car engines, a block and tackle. And so, once hearing this information, they start questioning, is this why our trucks wouldn't start that night? Okay, so at this point, with all of this added on evidence and weird coincidences and things that witnesses had reported, George sends a formal request to the FBI to try and get their help, because they were kind of on their own. Local authorities really were not being supportive. At the time, J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is the FBI, and he replies to the family's inquiry by saying, quote, his children were going to die in the fire. Excuse me, what? No, like, okay, if we don't think this is a crime before, we do now. Tinsley also tells the family that he had a long conversation with the fire chief, Morris, and Morris had confided in him that he had found a heart at the scene. However, when supposedly this heart had been placed in a box and buried, and because of this, they have it exhumed and taken to a funeral director. But it ultimately is declared not a heart, but beef liver that had never been in a fire of any sort. Tinsley was also supposedly told by others that Morris had bragged that he hid the fake heart in an attempt to placate the family should they try to continue their investigation into the missing children. So, like, why are they trying to get stopped at every turn? Like, wouldn't local authorities want to help unless they had something to hide? Sadly, the years would come and go. The Sodder children never appeared, though reports of sightings did continue to trickle in over time. George and Jenny, the devoted, loving parents that they were, never relented. In 1949, they brought in a pathologist from Washington, D.C. by the name of Oscar B. Hunter, who expertly and thoroughly went through the entire crime scene records and the actual house itself. Now, by this time, George had filled in the remnants of what was their basement with dirt to create a memorial to his missing children, which I think is so beautiful. They excavate the basement, and among charred personal effects, Hunter found a handful of splinters of vertebrae that were sent to the Smithsonian Institution, which the Smithsonian is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex, if you are not aware. And it's located in Washington, D.C., where this pathologist was from. The findings read, quote, "The human bones consist of 4 lumbar vertebrae belonging to one individual. Since the transverse recesses are fused, the age of this individual at death should have been 16 or 17 years. The top limit of age should be about 22, since the centra, which normally fuse at 23, are still unfused. On this basis, the bones show greater skeletal maturation than one would expect for a 14-year-old boy, which was the oldest missing child. It is, however, possible, although not probable, for a boy 14 and a half years old to show 16 to 17 maturation." End quote. Also, the bones that were found showed no evidence of being in a fire. With all of that said, the results were inconclusive, but based on the fact that the vertebrae shards were not charred and no other pieces of the 5 possible skeletons were uncovered, the vertebrae were believed to have been brought in with the dirt that George used to fill the basement. So they didn't believe that this was anything related to the kids. With no help from local authorities and no leads to go off, George and Jenny would erect that billboard with photos of their 5 missing children, and also offered a $10,000 reward. Just for a little background, $10,000 at this time was pretty close to the equivalent of $120,000. This billboard that they had erected stood near their home in West Virginia for almost 4 decades. The Sodders spent those decades never giving up hope and dealing with a slow but steady stream of tips and sightings. The last one would come in 1968, almost 20 years after the fire. Jenny received an unmarked letter, postmarked from a city in Kentucky. It contained a photograph of a young man who she and George believed eerily looked the same as their son Louis, who went missing at 9 years of age. And they thought, like, wow, this looks like our son if he were now a grown adult, which at the time he would have been 29. Flipping the photo over, Jenny read the scrawled inscription: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Illy Boys, A90132, or possibly A90135. Now, this isn't so surprising to me, but authorities dismissed this as a hoax. I think you guys already know my opinion on this. I don't know how that's a hoax. Like, okay, if it was just a postcard, sure, fine. That's someone screwing with the family. But the fact that it was a photo of a child, or now a young man, of a young man that had a striking resemblance to their son. Like, what are you talking about? It's a hoax. More than anything, it's just baffling to me at how authorities just really didn't care. They either didn't care or they were covering something up, in my opinion, given the fact that the coroner's jury included that life insurance salesman that was very threatening and said awful things that ended up being true. Like, what? I don't know, I can't wrap my head around this one. A year after this letter came in the mail, George would die, which was 1969. And Jenny ended up dying in 1989. So Jenny lived an additional 20 years. After that postcard letter photo thing came in the mail, no additional evidence was ever found. No more tips came in, and no one would ever know what really happened to the Sodder children that fateful Christmas Eve. George and Jenny were never convinced that their children died in that fire, but that it was truly a cover-up for a kidnapping. Family members have speculated that George was recruited by mafia members that were known in the community, but that he potentially refused, and in doing so, that caused the fire to be set and for their kids to be kidnapped as retaliation from the mafia. Another consideration was that the family was being extorted. Honestly, there are so many unanswered questions with this one. You know, what was that noise that Jenny heard on the roof? Who was the caller on the phone? Why were no remains found in the fire? Why were the vehicles not able to turn on? Why was the ladder missing? Why was the front door unlocked? All these things that just don't make sense. The youngest Sodder family, Sylvia, who was only 2 at the time of the fire, lived until last year in 2021. She passed at the age of 79, and just like her parents, she never believed that her siblings perished in the fire. As the years continue to go by, and with the loss of the last of the Sodder children, chances that a definitive answer become less and less likely. Thank you for joining me for that case. I don't like using this word, saying that was a favorite true crime case of mine, because favorite makes it sound so positive, and none of the cases that we cover and talk about are positive, but this is one that was so intriguing to me. I guess you could say I was enthralled with this one. I don't know, this one just hit differently for me. Please let me know what you thought about this case. I'm curious to know if any of you think that the kids actually did die in the fire. I'm curious to know if any of you believe that they didn't. There's something about that mafia idea that also sticks with me. Like, when you think of the mafia and the mob, and if you've done any research on them, or if you've ever